For almost 1 month, the world watched as the highest ever scoring AFCON tournament, that is AFCON 2025, took place in Morocco. And now the Tehranga Lions of Senegal have been crowned champions. Welcome to today's video, guys. Today I'm going to be talking about a couple of things ranging from the review of the match, which was the final between Senegal and Morocco, and as well I'm going to talk about the Super Eagles and their journey at AFCON as it came to an end in the third place game against Egypt. So guys, let me get straight into it. And before I go to the final, I think there's only one place to start, right? So what I was going to say about this initially, people would have felt like I was trying to play devil's advocate. But having watched that final and the officiating that I saw, I have to say that Asisat Oshola's comment on why every CAF tournament and event is taking place in Morocco now holds more weight than when I first saw it. And for those of you who have not seen what she said, I'm going to add it to this video. Asisat Oshola basically came out to question why literally every major football tournament and award is held in Morocco. And while I agree with some of the things she said, there's also another part of the tweet where she said that, other African countries need to step up, which is what I'm going to touch on right now, because a lot of us Nigerians and other Africans saw the infrastructure in Morocco while AFCON was going on. And deep down in our minds, we knew that in our respective countries, we cannot have that kind of infrastructure in the next 10 years. It is not me exaggerating, it's just me saying the truth. Now, if we want to be honest with ourselves, Morocco have basically made it easy for CAF to decide that they are going to host all these things. And then again, there's another thing that is also surprising me, the fact that people are not actually asking how the bidding process is going to go. They are not actually familiarizing with the bidding process, because a lot of these tournaments and events, other countries are not bidding for them. And so when Morocco bid for it, it's very easy for CAF to award it to them. So first things first, we need to develop the infrastructure, football infrastructure, sporting infrastructure. And that's also if we have a leadership in general that is sports loving and football loving in particular. And then we need to also make sure that before we come out and say that, why does Morocco get to host all these things, that we need to ask if our respective countries are actually bidding to host this tournament. That's something very important, because again, people are not actually familiarizing themselves with the bidding process for these tournaments and events. Most of these tournaments are events that do not usually make a lot of money, and they are very expensive to host. And that's one of the reasons why, aside infrastructure, a lot of African countries shy away from hosting these tournaments. So I think this is a very major issue raised by Asisat Oshola, which, by the way, other people have been talking about it. She's not the first person to talk about it, but I think it's also necessary that for someone of her caliber and her profile in African football and in women's football, she's a legend of African football. The fact that she has raised that issue, and because I know for a fact that it is something that a lot of players will shy away from, but the fact that she has raised that issue, especially considering the fact that the next women's AFCON is going to be held in Morocco again for the third consecutive time, the fact that she has raised that issue is going to at least stir up a conversation. And honestly, I cannot stay on any side of the argument. There are two sides. Two things can be true. Yeah. Are Morocco being given favors or being handed favors because of the fact that they host every tournament? Maybe. I cannot say that 100%, without further evidence. But then again, you look at the other side of the conversation. The fact that, we saw, again, I said, we saw the infrastructure in Morocco. We saw the football pitches. They were world class. Throughout this AFCON tournament, it was raining, it was cold. And we saw that not for a single time in that tournament were there waterlogged pitches. In most other countries in Africa, with the amount of rain that was falling during the AFCON tournament, we would have seen a lot of waterlogged pitches and terrible football that would not have spoken well for African football in general. So we saw that Morocco spent millions of dirhams to build public toilets to accommodate the hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of fans that will be coming in to Morocco. And that was just in the capital, Rabat alone. We saw other things, the world-class facilities, training facilities, and all of that. Now, again, when we want to ask why Morocco is hosting all of this, we need to ask ourselves also, can we replicate this in our respective countries? That's where I'm going to rest my case. I will go on to the next prompt, which is the review of Nigeria versus Egypt, the third place game at AFCON. And of course, I did say in my last video that I'm not sure if I'm going to watch this game, and maybe my opinion of, maybe that opinion would change before the game. It did change because I did watch the game from start to finish, and I thought, well, just as the way I thought about the game was probably the way the players thought about the game. I was watching a show before that game where an ex-Nigerian footballer, Ida Petersai, basically said, the third place game is a game that nobody wants to play, but also a game that nobody wants to lose, which is true, because at the end of the day, players are probably playing for pride and all of that, and basically a consolation, and Nigeria won the match. Obviously, 0-0 went to penalties. This time we were able to win. Stanley Wabali with 2 massive penalty saves, saving the penalty from Salah and Mamouche, So there's not much to comment on that match because it was a day before the final. So I'm happy that we won, but if we lost, it wouldn't have bothered me. And Eric Chell also did mention that, winning that match was also important for him and maybe his future with the Super Eagles, because I did hear before the tournament that the mandate that he was given was to get the Super Eagles to the final. But even though we came up short, I feel like more Nigerian fans than not believe that he should stay with the Super Eagles and should not be fired. So it remains to be seen what's going to happen with that. But that match, there was not much to read into it. I thought maybe we were the better team, and on penalty we won the game. So yeah, that's that about that. And so let me go into the Senegal versus Morocco game proper. And this game, Senegal started the better team, and they had a very good chance in the open, in 4 minutes, a header that Bono saved. But as the game went on, I felt like it was very similar to the Nigeria game. There were a couple of moments, outside of Bono basically making 2 massive saves, saving a one-on-one chance from Iliman Ndiaye of Senegal. There was a time, I feel like most of the game was played between the midfield, and then outside of those 2 chances, let me just fast forward to towards the end of that game, because that's where most of the talking points are really. Senegal scored, obviously, for all of you that have watched that game. Senegal scored, and it was chaos, really, because the goal was ruled out for an alleged foul. I call it alleged because, again, I cannot see how that is a foul. Because as far as I saw and what I watched, the 2 players, Hakimi and I can't remember the Senegalese player now, who was alleged to have fouled Hakimi, they literally both tried to use their hands to push themselves. And Hakimi fell because maybe he was not strong enough in that duel. And that was why the referee ruled out that goal. Did not go to VAR to check it. So a few minutes later, Senegal conceded a penalty, by the way, which I 100% believe was a clear penalty. And I do believe that when all of this is done and dusted, and when the Senegal players have celebrated, and when the adrenaline has calmed down, they probably watch the replay of the match. I think they all agreed that was a penalty because it was an obvious foul, and the ball was coming in the direction of Brahim Diaz, who was fouled. So I don't think that's what got them angered, because for everybody who watched, they walked off most of the players on the pitch walked off the pitch for a couple of minutes, and it took Sadio Mane usually calling them back on the pitch. It took a lot of convincing for them to come back on the pitch, and during all of that time, they basically just probably disoriented Morocco a bit, and who was going to be the penalty taker for Morocco. Because at some point I saw Nesiri holding the ball, and then I saw Brahim Diaz eventually holding the ball. It took about 10 minutes, that whole controversy, and then Brahim Diaz, when the players came back onto the pitch, Brahim Diaz was the one who eventually took it and attempted a panenka that in real time felt like the whole world slowed down, because I wasn't sure what I was watching. And Edouard Mendy just basically grabbed the ball into his hands, and the game went on, and then the referee blew, and it was extra time. So that was literally going to be the last kick of the game, and it was just crazy. From there, extra time came, Senegal scored. I was really happy because I think from when this whole tournament started, I did not believe that. I did not want to. I was very careful to not go toe the line of the people who said Morocco were being favored with officiating. Although I know that there were some controversial calls, like the penalty that was not awarded for Tanzania, or that could have been awarded, let me say, for Tanzania late in the game in the round of 16. And then also a potential penalty for Morocco in the for Cameroon in the quarterfinals for a foul on Brian Mbeumo. I think it was from that game that I started to feel a certain type of way. But in the game against Nigeria, even like I didn't feel like, okay, yes, there were a couple of controversial refereeing calls in that game, but it was not like a major referee call that I felt like really, really affected the game like that. Except for that yellow card for Calvin Bassey. That was the one that, I felt like at that moment would have disoriented him, even though it was not a sending off. But mentally, it would have affected him, knowing that if we had qualified for the final, he would have not been able to play. So I think that was like the height of the officiating, of the controversial officiating against Nigeria. But overall, I don't think there's any major call that changed the course of that game. So even at then, I still was a bit laid back as regards talking about the officiating. But it was in this final that I said, nope, enough is enough. And I've seen enough with that goal. The fact that, that goal was not reviewed in a final, a goal scored in a final was not reviewed for an alleged foul. It was not called VAR at all. And then, VAR was now the one who brings the referee's attention to the foul on Brahim Diaz, was what, made me say, no, I'm not having it. This is not normal. And honestly, I think the football gods just wanted Senegal to win that final, because if you look at the circumstances, the penalty that they conceded was just minutes after a goal I feel like was wrongfully disallowed for them. And then all of the brouhaha that happened, so to say, they go into the tunnel protesting, they come back out after some minutes, and then they try to shake off the Moroccan players who want to take the penalty. They try their best. Some of them get yellow carded by the referee. Morocco eventually takes the penalty. Brahim Diaz plays in Panenka. He misses it. The match goes to extra time immediately, and then they score in extra time, and then they just win it. Like, you can't write the script, really. It's hard. You can't write the script. The football gods wanted Senegal to win. That's how I just see it, because they were very good on the day, but it was going to take something else for them to win that game that I watched. It was not going to be because of footballing ability. It was going to take something else for them to win that game. So yeah, that's just it for the review of that game. And to go to a few of my last prompts here, the overall review of the quality of football at AFCON 2025. And I have felt like this was a very, very good AFCON tournament, football-wise. And obviously, that's due to the quality of the pitches, like I've talked about earlier, and the overall quality of the football and sports infrastructure in Morocco as a whole. The tournament was held in about 6 cities: Marrakesh, Rabat, Fez, Tangier, Agadir, and I can't remember the last one now. And it was at Casablanca, and it was exciting football to watch. And this was the highest ever scoring tournament, like I said. But one thing that I took note of was the fact that there are very, very few upsets in this AFCON tournament. AFCON is a tournament that sometimes could be unpredictable. You tend to have this upset sometimes that you don't see coming. But there were very few upsets in this tournament, and I have what I think are a few reasons why there were very few upsets in this tournament. One of them is because of the quality of the pitches. If you look at previous AFCON tournaments, you look at the pitches, and the pitches kind of contributed to the quality of the football and why they were upset. Because sometimes you would see a team, an underdog team, scoring first in a game, and the team who is better, if you look at two teams, a big team playing an underdog team, which team needs a better pitch the most? Is the big team, because they are going to be the ones to play good football. But if an underdog team scores first, a bad pitch can work in their favor, because they can just play anyhow and scrape out the win. After all, it's the big team that needs to play quality football to win. And then again, another thing we need to take note of was the weather in Morocco. it was not, it was very much suited to the big boys, the big teams. The big teams have a lot of big players playing in Europe. Now, what's the average weather like in most of those European countries where they play? It's very similar to the weather we saw in Morocco. The hottest I saw any of the match days was 17 degrees, which to Nigerians is very cold, but to the average players playing in Europe is normal European weather, right, for most of the year. The coldest I saw was probably 9 degrees, which was the final that I watched. So that also contributed to the fact, to the good football that we saw. The weather, considering the fact that most of the players in those big teams are playing in Europe and European clubs in countries where that weather is very similar, and the fact that the pitches were in really good condition, so it encouraged good football. Like, you could not hide to scrape a win in this tournament. You needed to play well. So I think that's why there were a few upsets, and I think that's what contributed to the overall quality of the tournament. And that's where I bring today's video to a close. And it's been really fun talking about AFCON from the first video, and now the final is over. I'm very, very happy that Senegal won this. I think it was justice served, honestly. And people are going to talk about Sadio Mane and his moments where he called the players back on the pitch, but I think that everything is always good in retrospect, because if he called the players on the pitch and Morocco still scored that penalty, I don't think people will be talking about it this much. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for watching my AFCON videos from the first one till now. Now that AFCON is over, I have some other things coming up for you guys in January and in February. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for subscribing as usual. If you enjoyed this video, please share to all football fans and all sports fans and everybody basically. And until I come your way next time, guys, it's bye for now. Ciao.